Hey, this is Ryan from Rocket SaaS, and you're listening to the SaaS Marketing Weekly podcast, the show that gives you actionable marketing strategies and campaign ideas to rocket your SaaS business. And if you want even more SaaS marketing ideas, go to saasmarketingweekly.com to join my free newsletter. Hello and welcome to another episode of SaaS Marketing Weekly with me, your host Ryan, the founder of Rocket SaaS. Last week, I got Jamie Skeels in the studio and we had an amazing episode about demand capture. The plan for the episode originally was to do that demand capture bit and then have a section at the end of the pod where we do Challenge Jamie. But because the episode was so long, I thought I'd split it into two. So we did the demand capture one, check that out as the previous episode. And this week we are going to be doing the Challenge Jamie bit, which is essentially where I give Jamie a challenge on how he would market a fictional business. And hopefully that will be similar to your business or it'll inspire you, because I'm sure there'll be some similarities. So without further ado, Challenge Jamie. So Challenge Jamie is where I give Jamie a fictional company with a particular pain point, challenge, company size, industry, budget. And I say, Jamie, if you were the marketing manager for this brand, what would you do? What strategy would you implement? So Challenge Jamie this week. The scenario you've got is you've got a highly niche B2B SaaS brand.
Right. Deal
size about 20K annually. So not too small, not too big. Company headcount is between 5 to 30 people, so relatively small. You've got a marketing budget of $5,000 a month. You're currently getting between 0 and 3 leads a month, mainly coming from the founders network. You don't have hardly any marketing resources in-house. The challenges are very niche product, limited market awareness, very little search volume for the product, dependence on the founders network to make sales so far, and there's a struggle to articulate the value proposition. So if you were the head of marketing for that business, how would you tackle the strategy?
Cool. Yeah, I'd probably start with taking a look at, okay, so particularly like if, let's just start from a starting point, like they've got a decent idea of they're going after. So like you said, maybe if they've done it through like the founders network, they've like won a bunch of clients, maybe they're outbounding a bit and they've won like a decent amount of clients, got a general idea of they're going after. Okay, let's look at the existing customer base and let's break that down. And what I'd try and understand is within that existing customer base, is there a clear trend that suggests that we should double down anywhere or anywhere that we can kind of focus our efforts where I think we can set up either campaigns or initiatives that are going to kind of like basically maximize the return of those campaigns and initiatives. So I'd look particularly really focus on targeting on the first kind of point of order. Look at, okay, the existing clients that we want, is there anywhere we can double down? Is there opportunities within that? That's where I'd start. The next thing I'd do is like, particularly if I can identify of those, that sort of client base, if I can identify like maybe there's a segment of that audience where I'm like, this is where we play well, like this is who we should be going after, this is where we can scale our efforts and kind of get more of these people in. People who are getting a lot of value out of the product, people we win better, people sales have better conversations with. I'll be looking at, okay, of that audience, I need to understand what is the unique value that we provide to that audience. You can do that talking to the sales team, like we mentioned earlier, talking to actually if you can get access to the customers, talking to the customers, listening to like the demo calls that if they've got them recorded, if they use tools like Gong and stuff like that. But I definitely try and understand, okay, what is it about this audience that like what do they love about us and what's bringing them to us?
So you try and narrow the audience as much as possible.
Yeah, so I would, in terms of particularly if we've got like a smaller budget, I would try and identify what's the, particularly for an early stages startup like this with a smaller budget, I would try and identify who's the highest value audience, what's the highest value audience, and what's the minimal, like sort of the minimum viable audience that can get us to the goals that we're trying to achieve. Because ultimately what it does, if we can narrow, if it's possible for us to narrow, it's always going to be different across different businesses. There's going to be variables that we can't control that maybe we have to broaden. But if we can narrow, then what that means is unlocks for us as a marketing team, as a sales team, is we can focus on messaging in particular. Messaging, positioning. And if we can like speak to a very specific buyer that we already know that we're getting traction with, then I think a good way of looking at it is that the broader you tend to go with messaging, the less effective it's going to be. The narrower you go, the more effective the messaging is going to be. So you have to find a balance between reach and being able to reach enough people to get to the goals that you need, but also trying to find what's the narrowest audience that you can speak to make an impression on them with your campaigns, with your messaging, with all the things you're going to be going to them with. So I'd be trying to identify who's that kind of segment that we use our sweet spot, basically. That would be a first point. Then, like I mentioned, find out what's valuable. Understand what we need to be saying to those people and getting out to those people, and then translate that into the messaging. And then I'd kind of be looking at, okay, how do we kind of get in front of those people? So this is going to be different, and there's going to be lots of things you have to consider when you're getting into like setting up like campaigns and tactics. Things like audience sizes are going to come into play and stuff like that. I'm not going to get too deep into that because it's a fictional client. But let's just say, like, for example, like we mentioned, we've checked the keyword search volume. Like, Google's out the window. So that's not something we could like look to run. Like, there's no search volume for what we're selling. It's not realistic. So we're not going to do Google.
So no SEO either.
If there's no search volume, then no, to be honest. I think there could be something to be said for, like, I think there's, I'm not an SEO expert, but there's something to be said sometimes, I think, for like low search volume, long tail keywords and setting up for those. There's a long burn strategy. And I think that's something that you'd have to work with the founder and understanding the founder, the business in general. What are their goals?
He wants leads now.
Then I probably, as head of marketing, wouldn't be prioritizing SEO as my immediate impact. I might look at SEO as like something that I do in the background, as like on the side to kind of build something long term, but it wouldn't be my like, this is what I'm going to focus on.
So you're not doing Google ads because no one's searching for it.
Yeah.
You're not doing SEO for the same reason. Therefore, you've got to find your audience where they are, but they're not looking. So is that presumably going to be LinkedIn?
I think if I was looking at like in particular to kind of scale where they're getting traction, the first couple of things I'd probably look at is, potentially LinkedIn. Like I'd look if the audience is there, and most of the time it is for B2B, I would look at LinkedIn. I think Meta can be something worth testing. Like we said earlier, Meta's targeting is difficult. If we think there's a viable route to target on Meta, then I would probably carve out some budget just to test. And especially I think it can be valuable Meta if you've got a good offer. Like if you've got like a good even maybe even a good freemium or just a good offer in general, I think Meta can be a worthwhile test because you're going to get fast feedback on the conversions about, are we bringing in the right people? So I would probably carve out some budget for Meta just to test and just understand if I think it's a viable channel based on the buyer. But I think LinkedIn is a really important one. Like it's probably going to be likely that we're going to go to LinkedIn. That's where our buyers probably are going to be spending a lot of time. So from my perspective, like I'm going to go onto LinkedIn and I'm going to look at your kind of remarketing audience size. I'm not going to get too deep into the weeds of that. But if we can carve out a remarketing audience and also apply some relevant filters that bring it closer to the ICP that I mentioned earlier, if we can have a viable size, then I'm probably going to start with the remarketing audience in the immediate term. Because what I'm going to want to prove out is, can we use remarketing as a conversion lever for the business? So are there buyers within that remarketing pool that we can convert kind of regularly using our remarketing campaigns? Typically, like if we're starting with a remarketing kind of first approach, the way that I would probably look to set it up is we'd have a mix of kind of what I would call like middle of funnel messaging and bottom of funnel messaging. So the middle of funnel messaging would be much more focused on kind of like, for that remarketing audience, like I mentioned, there's going to be a pool of people who might be ready to buy, probably within that audience, and a large portion that maybe not ready to buy yet, but they've obviously interacted with the brand before. So I'd set up middle funnel content that would go to all that audience, and that content, those ads, that messaging would be focused on what are the questions that a prospect might have that would stop them having either taken us up on a bottom of funnel offer or having a positive interaction with our sales team. Like, what does the buyer need to know to be able to convert, fill those gaps, smooth the path to conversion? So that's going to be things like countering objections. That's going to be things like you versus competitors. It's going to be like who's using you, social proof, use cases, how it works, product tours. What does the product look like? What does a buyer need to know? That's what the middle of funnel layer is going to be like focused on. And then what I'm also going to be looking to do probably is set up a bottom of funnel campaign, which is much more focused on serving a good offer. So that is anyone who's potentially in market in that remarketing audience right now, I want to serve them a great offer to convert them, get them in front of sales, take up the free trial, whatever your kind of path may be. And I'm going to set that up, basically, that remarketing audience, and start trying to prove it out as a lever to, one, get direct conversions. But that's not the full story, obviously. You're going to have like a portion of people who might click on an ad, convert directly them. But I'm also going to be looking at things like, are we seeing like an increase in like organic people coming inbound? You can use great tools like Fibbler now to understand, did those people have like interactions with our ad previously, things like that. But then I think the important thing I would do for this client, so particularly where they're at, so early stage, maybe they don't have loads of market presence yet. If I've set that LinkedIn campaign up, I think it would be really important to try and tie that LinkedIn campaign with what we're doing on outbound. So basically try and sort of integrate the two programs together a bit. So I think what I'd be doing is serving those ads to that remarketing audience. Ideally, it's kind of like tailored to the ICP I met earlier, if possible. And then I'd be looking at, okay, are there signals coming off of these campaigns and data that comes off of these campaigns that we can pass to the outbound team to start testing? Okay, we're getting all these people kind of all of these accounts, all of these people interacting with our ads, potentially signing up to certain like content. If you are running kind of like more top of the funnel gated stuff, it's not what we tend to do, but some businesses do that. It's valuable at some points. But I'd be looking at, okay, are there signals that we can run? Then let's bring in outbound from the other side and start reaching out to these accounts, to these people. Can a timely message from the outbound team, especially as we've been serving the messaging, getting in front of those people, warming them up a bit, basically. Can we bring those two things together and maximize our chances of anyone who is in market in that remarketing pool? Can we come together and maximize our chances of converting those people? That would be like my kind of starting point, really. And then, like I mentioned as well, I'd probably carve out some budget, particularly if we had a good offer and we think the targeting could work on Meta. But that would be my kind of starting point, I think. And like we mentioned before we got into any of the tactics, before the channels, before all that, the key thing is we'd be working on, if we know who our buyer is and we know kind of what our messaging should be, is the messaging on the homepage and the website and the demo page and all of those key pages, is that as good as it can possibly be? Have we tightened up all of those conversion paths on the website? Have we got, like you said, as the like bucket being plugged, have we got the right foundations in place? When we switch these campaigns on, we're confident that we've got the right foundations in place to actually capture those people. Yeah. That would be kind of my starting point. But again, I think the important thing to take away is that like, it's always going to be dependent on where you're, like we're working from the head of marketing, where your company's at, what resources they have, all that stuff needs to be taken into account. So that would be something I'd be looking at if I was actually working on it, but I think that would be a good starting point.
Yeah, love it. Yeah. Well, to give my suggestion, it's not challenge Ryan, it's challenge Jamie. but to add my 2 cents, when I've worked with highly niched B2B SaaS businesses, it usually means that you have a very experienced, very like thought leader of a founder, usually the person that's built the product or worked in a very technical industry before. And I always find that hopefully, if they're up for it, you can leverage that founder as a thought leader. Yeah, so get them hosting a podcast, hosting a webinar series, or if they're not willing to be on camera or on audio, interview them. So as the marketing manager, you should be interviewing that thought leader and extracting as much thought leadership as possible from them, and then turning that into great content. So turning it into blog articles and LinkedIn posts, potentially videos. And that's a great way of getting your niche product in this niche market in front of the right people, because hopefully it gains respect from that thought leader, and potentially use LinkedIn thought leader ads. They're pretty low cost compared to normal LinkedIn ads to really grow the personal brand of that founder. So that's the only thing I'd add.
Yeah, no, I think that's a really good point, to be honest. And there's a really good play that a lot of people are having success with at the minute, which is particularly if you've got a founder, like you mentioned, who's like, they've got a good following on LinkedIn, they're active, they're writing content, getting engagement. Like, I think there's a really good kind of combo you can sort of test, which is if you use thought leader ads in your cold layer of LinkedIn to kind of fuel the remarketing layer. So you set up your thought leader ads from which is boosting all of the organic content that your founder's kind of putting out there, sending that to your ICP, gets like huge engagement in those posts. So like they get like really like loads of clicks, loads of engagements. It builds your remarketing audience quickly, which is like brilliant because you're getting the relevant people into your remarketing audience. And then you can run conversation ads, which is more of a bottom of funnel play, but do it from the founder. And basically you serve a great offer from the founder, and it goes, a conversation ad is like an in-mail, but it's like gives multiple steps and options. And you can combine those two things, especially like for a niche product like that. Maybe the brand hasn't got a lot of awareness, but the founder does. Mm-hmm. That can be a really nice kind of 1-2 sort of thing where they see the thought leader ad. That's their first kind of interaction. Then they get a really timely message via the conversation ad. I think there's a lot of people kind of like having success with that play at the moment. I think for a founder, it's a really good one.
Yeah, love it. Well, thank you so much. That was episode 1 of Challenge Jamie. So yeah, tune in next week and every other week for Challenge Jamie. If we keep it running, maybe we'll sack it off. But yeah, hopefully your business will end up popping up on Challenge Jamie, be the perfect fit, and you can learn from Jamie about how to scale the business. But Jamie, thank you so much for coming on the SaaS Marketing Weekly podcast. Hopefully, if you're up for it, we're going to get you as a regular guest.
Absolutely. It's great, wasn't it?
But no, you've been brilliant. So thank you so much. If you want to learn more about me and Jamie and our agency, Rocket SaaS, go to rocket-saas.io. If you need support with some of your SaaS marketing, then go on the website, book a free SaaS marketing strategy call. We'll walk you through how we would do strategy for your SaaS business, and we can talk about how we work together. You can see our pricing is on our website, very transparent with all that. But yeah, thanks again. See you next week.